Hello, everyone. My name is Kenny, and I'm the program coordinator at StartSpace. I'm excited to be here at day 2 of the festival, and welcome to the Need for Speed MVP workshop with Guy Inbar, co-founder at DifferenThinking, presented today as part of the Future Founders Festival 2021 in partnership with Study Melbourne and StartSpace, powered by State Library Victoria. We'll already heard a lot about MVP, but what is it actually and why is it important? So stay tuned as Guy will take us through all of that and more in a moment. But before we begin the session, a few reminders again. To participate in the audience Q&A for the session, please use the Slido Ask a Question box. This is where you can ask questions to the festival presenters, and we'll get to as many as we can at the end of the session. To interact with each other and make comments, please use the Join the Conversation chat box. You can also react to the event using the emoji bar, which is along the bottom of the live stream panel. Don't forget to use our hashtag FFP21 to share on socials during the festival. And thanks again for joining us today. I hope you will enjoy the session. And now I'd like to hand over to Guy to kick us off. Guy.
Thank you very much, Kenny. Good day, everyone. So my name is Guy, and I'm a co-founder at DifferenThinking, which is a consultancy firm. I'm also a product principal at a company called Pexa. I've been in product management for the good period of the last 15, 17 years, and I've been dealing with both physical and digital products across a very broad range of segments and industries. Today's topic, and you can connect with me on social if you like, and I'm always happy to have a chat, so feel free to note that down if you like. Just sort of talking about today's objectives, so to say, I'm going to talk a bit about some things that you probably touched on during the last day and a half in terms of problems, and then understand a bit about, okay, so we've identified problems, what do we do next? How do we actually unpack the value of those problems, and how do we actually line it up the right solutions to potentially explore in the context of those problems? And then I'll sort of finish with some experiments and how do we go about actually, once we have a product out there, how do we actually maintain that sort of cadence in understanding the change that customers need and what sort of issues do we need to address going forward? Just a quick question, and something that I know that you guys are probably will be very familiar with, but it would be really nice if you could sort of just dot down. I think you have some sort of a Slack, not a Slack, but a chat channel that you can share. This question talks about customer-centric companies. How much more profitable are they than companies that are less? And there's a bit of a range here between 20, 40, 60, 80%. So if you can take a moment to just reflect on that and flick it across, that will be pretty good. Just so you know, sorry, just jump there. The answer for this is around 60%. So around 60%, so companies that are more customer-centric will be 60% more likely to create better value to themselves compared to others. The thing which I wanted to prefix with is that speed doesn't mean doing things faster in the context of product development. What it actually means is that we are providing incremental value to customers quicker. So that's the whole context of speed when you talk about product development. So I think it's important to just understand that in the context of what we're going to sort of talk about today. Another thing which is good to reflect on is that customers feel more strongly about experience in many cases than they do about the actual feature in the product, which is why I've sort of reframed this topic today to not only talk about MVP, but also to add what is called the MVE, so the minimal viable experience. And I'll sort of couple them together to make sure that you can actually understand the value of that when you're starting to consider what sort of solutions you may put forward to your users. Another thing which I think is important to reflect upon is that most products in the market don't survive their first year. So failure is a very big part of product development. And you may find that things that you work on and you're quite certain that are heading in the right direction, actually you may not, which is why, again, we want to try to validate as much as we can up the front in order to avoid as much as we can the fall down on the back of any development that we do, given the expense that is required around efforts and resources to actually develop a product. So just quickly, I thought we'll recap on what the product development lifecycle looks like. And we essentially have 7 sort of stages across the life of a product. You have that sort of ideation phase at the beginning, the planning where you do a lot of your research and your validation. You then obviously go into your product development in terms of working with your squads, with your technical, operational people. Depends on what type of product you have available and the market that you operate within. When you look at the launch, from my perspective, this is not a full-blown launch. Anytime that you actually put something in front of a customer or a user, that will be a launch, which is why I look at an MVP as a mini launch. Okay, we keep on, and then from that point, we keep on interacting. We keep on relaunching or launching new and enhancements or features. Because on the back of that, we actually try to learn as much as we can to make decisions about our progress. Are we going to persevere with what we have designed in terms of our roadmap? Or do we need to pivot? Do we need to change? Do we need to address something? Have we actually learned something about our customers' behaviors and the way that they interact with their product in order to make adjustments? Obviously, we then get to stages which, where the product has actually sort of hit the mark. You get that sort of product market fit. You get scale. Your startup might start to become a scale up and then become a business. Okay, so all of that becomes more realistic in terms of the steady state and where you go. And then obviously you get to the tail end of a product where you need to make decisions around, do you maintain it, kill it, and so on. So I just thought that will be really important in the context of what we're talking today, just to sort of realize what are the sort of key topics that you might ask yourself when you are looking at your product and when you're considering the market, your users, and the elements that are really important to each one of those areas. Now, there could be a raft of other things that are important to cover, and this sort of slide just reflects on some of them so that you can actually recognize that there's different elements on different types and for each one of those stages. So just keeping that in the back of your mind when you're looking at your product development and understanding how important it is to do a lot of your planning and in the beginning before you get to the stage of the actual development. Another thing which I thought would be really good to reflect on is the fact that within the product development lifecycle, you have different stages for that product. So, and what that tells you is that you have different user types and customers types that you will need to engage with. And the thing that we are going to focus on today is really more at the beginning. Okay, so when you don't know a lot of things, you don't even, in many cases, you're not aware who your customers and users are. And just in terms of this, the thing that is important to maintain there is that what you're looking to obtain at that phase is as much feedback as you can, okay? Which is why you do not need to think about your product as being a full-fledged product. And I know that many companies, a lot of times, don't feel comfortable putting half-baked product in front of a user. But what I find is that users, in particular at the beginning, when you're putting things and products in front of them, they're willing to tolerate a lot of the experience in order to provide you with feedback. So a lot of times those sorts of early adopters will be more willing and forgiving and less critical about some of the things that you're putting because they know that this is just the beginning. And what you're trying to do is to learn and to become better with the product and more suitable to the market. So in that context, we then look at the next sort of phase. So before you actually start going down the path of development and MVP and MVE and all of the rest, you need to actually define yourself. What is the problem statement? What is actually happening with the users? What do they actually say? What do they tell you? How do they go about addressing those issues at the moment? Because for every problem, in many cases, users actually go about solving it some way. And the question that you need to ask yourself is how big that problem is. And if what I design, if what I develop would actually address that substantially for those users to actually decide, okay, it's worthwhile paying for that product, your product, and avoiding sort of the shortcuts that I'm doing at the moment to address that problem. And obviously on the back of that, you also have your own hypothesis around that sort of a problem statement. And really what we see is that problems are everywhere and they can come from all such shapes and forms, which is why it's our responsibility to actually determine which is the one that we need to focus on. So what I just wanted to, apology there on the head, it sort of flipped a bit. But basically, if I'm Uber and I'm working there as a product manager, and this is at the beginning, and I need to sort of decide what is my problem statement, probably what they said to themselves was something along the lines that people are not really being able to find cabs easily, and then obviously pay. Some didn't accept credit cards, other people didn't have cash. All those problems emerged into an hypothesis, which basically spoke about the fact of finding and paying. And the hypothesis was, if we make that easier, the likelihood of people using our product, being the ability to book a vehicle, would become something of value, and people will use our product. Fast forward to a couple of years ago now, there was, sorry, I'll just jump one slide and then go back to this one. There was another problem that Uber was trying to solve in the same context of users, but this time they were focusing on safety. So if you look at the left there, the problem that existed was that female passengers were reluctant to go with male drivers because of some safety issues that happened with Uber. So what they did is they surveyed a lot of their female users. They then focused on the one that they felt was appropriate for the context of this problem that they had, and made their sort of hypothesis that if they were providing a safe environment for female riders and for female drivers to participate in the Uber sort of, I don't remember exactly what it was called, but Uber sort of safe, they will get more traction in that market of female passengers. And in this instance, I'm just sort of highlighting a typical user persona, which was developed on the back of that. And I recommend highly for yourselves, if you have a moment, to Google some of these experiments to actually have a look at that, because they've put a lot of structure in actually going through that thinking process before they actually develop the product. And it's called out very well across some of the areas on the net. So what happens next? Once we get, we've found all of these problems, we have made this, we validated our assumptions, we defined our hypothesis. What happens next? So just looking here at this double diamond, which is your sort of typical framework around ideation, we get to the stage where we need to consider what it is that we're going to deliver. And the problem that we have is that we are not 100% certain that the thing that we think would bring the value would actually bring the value that we hope it will. And what I mean by that is that we may have a solution in mind, but what we all know is that solutions are not all born equal. And our ability to determine if that is the right solution will be very much predicated by the fact if our users will understand it, will be willing to pay for it, or or provide some other value on the back of that, and then obviously allow us to learn and to scale that going forward, which is why I sort of highlighted that sort of area of between the deliver and the evolve. And essentially what I'm looking here is at the What is it that we can put in front of users that is valuable enough for them to understand? It is not too, we don't need to invest too much in order to build it. And what we see here is the difference between minimal and viable. Okay, so minimal will be some stuff that you can put in front of customers, but they can't use it. So you do not want to be there. You want to be in a situation where you're putting enough value in front of them. However, you haven't gone overboard because you do not work for a big corporate at the moment. Maybe some of you do, but a lot of you don't. So you're working in a startup, you have your own idea, you want to test it. So you need to find that sort of balance between the two, which is exactly what we come about when we talk about minimal and viable. Okay, it has to be viable enough for users to actually understand it, and it has to be minimal enough for you not to invest and to go overboard, because you're bootstrapping many times. You do not want to spend too much on that. So this is really where that sort of balance becomes minimal but viable product and experience. Okay, the product has to be minimal, but the experience has to be viable so that people can actually interact with that. And what we find when we talk about minimal viable products and minimal viable experience is that you want to be able to test and learn from whatever you're putting in front of a customer, which is why metrics are so important. You need to be able to define what is the metric that you're going to test and what are you going to test it against. Okay, you need to be able to benchmark. You need to have a baseline of some sort. And we find many different ways to actually develop those baselines, even if we are coming up with a total new product in the market. You can always find other metrics to attribute to that. So we need to find metrics. We need to know who the users are. What are the risks that are associated with our product if we put it forward? What do we want to avoid? And obviously, what is the value of our product? I'm certain that many of you are familiar with this framework. But what we want to make sure is that whatever we are putting in front of customers is always something that they can use. As I've mentioned earlier, in the good old days, so to say, when the approach was more for waterfall type of development, you would go away, develop something, and 6 months later, come and put it in front of customers. Given that the industry wasn't moving very fast, that was pretty appropriate. What happens today, in particular within the digital space, is that obviously is becoming less appropriate. And you need to be able to put value in front of your customers on a very rapid pace, because what happens during that journey, things change, and you need to be able to adapt and react to that. Okay, which is why I always feel that this slide, despite the fact, or this sort of image, despite the fact that it's not, always the same case, allows you to understand that even if you're giving a crappy experience at the beginning, people are still able to use it. They may not enjoy it, but they're able to understand what you're putting in front of them. And as you progress and you become more proficient in what you're giving them and the experience that you're giving them, they become happier, which means that the end product that you're putting in front of them reflected on the feedback that you've got throughout that journey, which is why basically you make them even more happy compared to what you see at the top, which is more of your sort of waterfall approach, so to say. And really what's really important is to remember that everything that you do, you need to be able to test, to learn, to measure, and to be able to make decisions on the back of that. And the reason why, again, I'm highlighting this, because your MVP and your MVE, whatever strategy you use, you need to be able to measure. So let's talk about some of the strategies that we have when we talk about minimal and viable. So essentially what we're trying to do here is, if, in this example, if you wanted to create this fancy wedding cake, probably take a lot of effort and a lot of funding to actually make it. And then you don't know if customers will actually warm up to that. So what you want to try to do is to get to a situation when you can mimic the experience, but not invest a lot of effort in order to get to that, which is why I sort of use this cupcake as a sort of small example here. But basically the taste will be the same. The look and feel may not, but at least you'll be able to know if your audience likes that taste, and then you can sort of pursue building that whole magnificent cake. So let's look at a few different strategies that we have. And the whole idea here is, how do we overcome the problem of investing too much and building something where we don't know if they will come? An example here is a landing page. So landing pages are a really cost-effective way of learning about a new product or a new concept that you want to put in front of your users. And I don't know how many of you will be familiar with Buffer, but Buffer basically allows you to manage your different social channels. And what they did when they actually started off, they put a landing page with some information, and they sort of said, if you're interested to learn more, click here, give us your email, and away you go. The problem that they had is that they were getting traction. There was interest in the product, but what they didn't know is actually what would be a reasonable sort of price point for their product. So what they did, they added another layer in between. And they not only ask you to click and enter your email, but they said, we're going to have 3 different pricing options, and each one with different characteristics. And what people needed to do is to just click on the one that they were looking to purchase and then give their email. So by the notion of people clicking on one of those price points and giving their email, the business was able to learn that not only that there's interest in the concept, but people are actually willing to pay, be it $5, $20, whatever the price, whatever this price ended up being, for the product. So even more than actually just taking it on face value as a free product. So there was interest in the product on a pay per basis, which is great when you're just starting off. Another way to test things, and those of you who are familiar with Pebble might be even familiar with their campaign. This was the first smartwatch, so to say. They did not know if the market is interested in smartwatches. All they knew is they need to test it somehow. So what they did is they made some designs there around the concept, and they put it in this crowdfunding platform to see if people will be willing to sponsor this, to fund this. And they said if they raise $1 million, they will be content. That will tell them that there is a market. They actually got over $10 million, which showed that there was a high demand for such a product. And then obviously everything else is history, because they were the pioneers in that sort of space. Another example is Concierge, and this is really where you don't even have to design or develop anything. You might just sitting on a street corner, and you're starting to talk to people about some sort of product that you want to put into the market, and you represent and you do all the work on their behalf. Okay, and Amazon started that way, basically as a bookstore, and the idea there was that what happened, although he probably was not thinking that that's what he was doing in terms of Bezos, it was a great place to get ideas. And he started using that platform, and he found out on the back of that people were looking for books that didn't exist in the libraries or in the bookshops. And on the back of that, this is just the beginning of the internet, he started to build a warehouse where he was able to ship books to people all over the US, given the fact that they didn't have access to that to begin. So again, Amazon, Concierge, you can see where they are today. The Wizard of Oz is another strategy that's been used. And this is really where you put a digital sort of front, maybe a landing page that has a bit of experience, some photos, ability to interact, not much more than that. And Zappos was a great example for that. The reason and what happened there, and Tony Hirsch was the founder, he actually lived in New York. And his idea was that if I want to test if people are willing to buy high-end shoes over the internet. And he went down to all sorts of shops there, took photos of shoes, in particular for females, for women, and then uploaded it to his own website. So there was just images. And if you clicked on it, it went back to him. He then may send you an invoice on a PDF file. You paid. He went down to the shop, bought the shoes, wrapped them up, went to the post office, and shipped it out to the person that bought it. So he did all of the manual work in the back end. But over a single day, once he put it out, he already paid it off. So people were very interested in that approach. So again, build on the back of that a whole e-commerce platform. Couple of other things to consider as you go along. Once you do have your product in the market, what do you do then? How do you actually test to see if there's valid thinking around the enhancements that you want to add? So a couple of ideas here. One of them is called the fake door test. And essentially what this does is that when you have a product, and in particular, say a website, and you want to see if there's interest in a concept that you're considering developing, you might just put a button there that says, click here to do something. And once people click, a message will come up, oh, thank you for clicking or for being interested. This is something that we are considering to develop, and it will be available, in the next iteration or whatever. This is a way for you to validate your assumptions around things that you are considering. So if you think about it from your MVP perspective, this is another MVP. Okay, because this is an MVP on an existing product. So it allows you to actually utilize the product that you already have in market and to avoid the pitfall of just doing stuff without knowing if there's a demand for it. Another one, which is a bit more famous, is your A/B testing. And this is really where you put one on your existing product. You have one instance that you're putting in front of the vast majority of your users, which is sort of the thing that you do on a day-to-day basis. So that's your product. And another instance, which you've tweaked a bit. And you put it just inside a subset of your users. And you want to see how they interact with it. And if they warm up to that, if they make it more engaging, if they sign up more to that, then you know that you have something that you may want to roll out across your whole portfolio or across your whole website or whatever the product is. So again, there are different ways to leverage these sorts of tests to make sure that you're actually focusing on the right thing to solve. And I can tell you that these experiments are going on constantly. And all of us are participating in these daily, in particular with brands like Facebook, Instagram, Google, Amazon, Apple. All of these brands constantly do thousands of A/B testing and all sorts of fake door testing on a daily basis. And we all participate with them, which is why in many occasions we may have one instance of a website, and the person sitting there next to us will have a very different, maybe not a very different, but a different interface. And the reason being is that one of us is being tested at the moment. We don't volunteer to do it, we just do, because that's how those brands, given the number of participants that they have, can afford to do that. So in summary, I think, if you really want to wrap this whole thing up and consider what is really important to take away, always make sure that you're asking the right questions. Dig deep, don't be shy, because understanding what is the problem beneath the problem is really important, and it's very difficult. It takes a lot of effort in distilling all of that to something that you can actually then build your problem statement and your hypothesis. It does not happen instantly. Think about what you want to test and to measure. Make sure that those metrics that you're considering and that you're thinking about are really relevant and they tie back to your hypothesis and to your problem statement. Okay, because if there's no connection, you can't validate those assumptions that you have made up front. And then decide which strategy to apply in order to validate your idea. Because obviously that is a very important part of this whole piece. If you select the wrong strategy, you may miss some things out, and you want to try to avoid those sorts of pitfalls. So overall, I hope that the last half an hour you found it of interest. Again, love to connect and to answer on any questions that you may have. And I'll pass it on now to Kenny.
Thank you so much, Guy. That was really, really good. So many great insights and tips. And I'm sure everyone in the audience learned so much from that, especially about this topic that, we've heard a lot about. Very practical tips. Thank you for that. And we've got lots of questions from the audience, actually. And we've just got a few, I think, that we've got time for. So I'll just go into the first one right away. Someone asked that, so you spoke about many different options or types of MVP tactics. The question is, how do you find the right MVP for your product?
So that's a really great question. That's what I was sort of alluding to earlier. You need to know, and you need to make a decision what it is that you're going to test. So I've mentioned earlier that some of those strategies are important for ideation. So, if you're at the very beginning of your process and you want to gather more information or sort of part of your ideation process, then you may use the concierge approach because that allows you to learn more around that sort of opportunity. However, if you're at a more mature, conceptually thinking stage, you may go down the Wizard of Oz option, where you put a face in front of users, but you are aware that you're going to need to do all of the, the work in the behind the scenes. So users will not know that this is not a fully fledged, fully automated, e-commerce platform. Not at all. Behind the scenes, you do all of the manual work. But from their perspective, the front end is going to be, it can be relatively slick, definitely. So I hope that gives a bit of a flavor for that.
Exactly. Thanks so much for that. And I guess another question, which is really good here, is for someone who's testing their MVP, they're asking if how long do they need to wait after launching the MVP to get the desired metrics or some sort of a metric of success that they're looking for?
So 2 things on that. The first thing is you'll need to define what the metrics are before you actually put your MVP in front of your customers. You need to define what is success, what does success look like for you. You're the one that makes those decisions, and you can benchmark it based on on other products. Okay, you need to find, as I've said earlier, you need to be able to find what is the benchmark that you're looking to achieve. Then on the back of that, you can make decisions around timeframes. I will say that the learning starts from day one, okay? Because what you'll see is customers will interact, they'll provide you feedback, in particular those early stage that are happy to participate and to be a bit more active. But even if not, what you find is that you're starting to get those sorts of measurements back. And then usually what happens is that you need to define what is an appropriate time, because each product will be different. Right, and there's no rule of thumb as such. From my experience, we have had situations where we have ran MVPs for a few weeks, others where we had to do it a bit longer. And again, it depends if it's a B2B product, if it's a B2C product, if it's a B2B2C product. All of those things and characteristics all fold into the approach, the strategy, the metrics, and the time. So again, I know it may not be the answer that the person was looking for, but unfortunately, there's no specific sort of framework. It's more of a mindset as to how do you unpack the situation and how can you make your ability to learn as effective as possible.
Great. I think that's a great answer. And yeah, I think we need to look into specifics in terms of what the product is, and then try to find, I guess, what's the best approach and the time frame as well. I guess another question here is, I guess we speak a lot about products today, but how about services? Is there an MVP for service?
The short answer is yes. Look at a service as a very similar lens to what we've spoke about today in terms of products. And the person asking is right. We could have prefaced this that, it's products, services, it's anything that we are putting, it's even people, okay? You can do about yourself things and test that as well. So you can put if it's a service, you do not have to build the service in order to enable it. Okay, you need to know what problem it is solving. You need to develop your understanding of the hypothesis that you want to test, and then look at ways at which you can do that without developing the whole service. Okay, so what I would suggest, and I've been in that situation in previous roles, working with what was defined as services, essentially take the same approach and look for ways to measure things and to test them without developing the whole service. Okay, so that's I guess the short and the long of it in this little time period.
That's great. And I mean, this is a very complex topic. I guess there's, today is about understanding a little bit about it as an introduction, but I'm sure there's lots and lots of resources out there that people can access. And I guess that's my next question. Do you have any recommendations in terms of any books, any blogs, or any other resources that you think people should access to learn more about this?
So the short answer is yes. The long answer is that there's a lot. So what I suggest, and Kenny, tell me if that is maybe I'll share stuff with yourself just instead of shooting them out here, and that can be shared with the wider audience with easy access so they can actually see and have a look, and that can be their baseline. They can then take it and explode from there, because there's a lot of good stuff that is available. What I will say is that a very simple Google of the best MVPs or the best MVEs or the most famous one, that will give a great starting point just there in terms of understanding a lot of brands and a lot of products that we're using today, just seeing how they came about. And probably if you think about Dropbox, the fact that they have used video almost 20 years ago when they started off, and seeing how they went with their MVP. And yes, they invested a bit more because they were all techies, so it was really easy for them. But look, they created an experience that didn't exist. And the product didn't work, but you felt that it was real. And on the back of that, they created a situation where people were saying, yep, we would love something like that. And that was in the days where it was dial-up and hard to try. So, things that maybe people in the room are not familiar with. However, they used video in order to create an MVP. So there's different strategies and tactics that you can take. It's just, again, understanding the context.
That's great. That's amazing. And we've got time for a few more questions, actually. So I'm just going to go ahead and share that. Interesting question here. Someone asked, I'm currently organizing a product proof of concept with a designer. They're asking, is this the same or similar to an MVP?
So a POC or proof of concept usually comes, it depends. It can come early. I'll say probably look at it as a prototype rather than looking at a POC, because a POC means that you already have something operational that you're putting in front of a customer. You're sort of leaving it in their hands. So is that an MVP? Maybe. It's a bit more confined because the customer already knows what they need to do with the product, usually within a POC. You usually sit and explain to them. Whereas with an MVP, you actually put it in front. You don't want to explain anything. You just want to see how they interact, and you want them to actually exchange value. Again, usually in a POC, they don't pay you for that, usually, which means that there's no exchange of value. You're just trying to test some things. Okay, so just keep that in the back of your mind. There's nothing bad with POCs, but I will say one thing: make sure that you time box it. Okay, 30 days, 2 weeks, whatever, and then make it commercial after that. So if they are happy with the POC, that it then becomes an operational product, and they know that they're going to pay for it. That's the only comment that I can sort of make around the POC and that concept.
That's very clear. And I mean, I've had that problem a lot as well. Like, what's the difference? There's so many different similar names, prototype or proof of concept and all of this. And I think that's a really clear explanation. I've got another great question here. What if the startup's main purpose is not providing a product? So as in like an NGO or a social enterprise, what do you think will be the MVP then?
So with NGOs and non-for-profits and others, again, I don't know the specifics, so it's a bit difficult to provide a specific answer, but I will say that the way I see this, and I actually sit on a board of a non-for-profit, and I can say that you do not need to look at a non-for-profit or an NGO as something which doesn't want to sustain itself. So even if you are coming with a concept around that, you need to be able to validate that there is a problem. Okay, that you're actually doing something, even if it is for the greater good, you still need to be in a situation where that is solving a problem, because in order for you to be sustainable, you'll either need to raise, philanthropic funding, but people don't fund just anything. So you need to be something that is concrete and coherent. And the other thing is that you need to find sort of not only adjacent, but sort of elements within your NGO, within your service, that you can monetize, okay, again, in order to sustain it. So some of those services and delivery services that are associated with that sort of NGO, how can you actually make them value that others will purchase? So those are the things that you need to consider and to test. And, like anything else, the fact that it is an NGO does not make it bulletproof to those sorts of risks and issues. So I think that conceptually, from my perspective, I think the approach should be the same. The outcome may be a bit different because of the structure, but otherwise, I'll take the same sort of approach when I do that.
And that's a really great point. Like, it's more, not so much the end product at the end, but it's more kind of the mindsets that you put into it. Like, what we're trying to do here is find a way to get almost real-time feedback, really, about what people are looking for, and if what we're offering as a solution to the problem is, fits what they're looking for. And I think that's really great, Ansa. And maybe just one final question before I let you go. Just so many questions, which is great. I think everyone's just really enjoying this. Do you have any strategies if your MVP is unsuccessful or basically not reaching the benchmarked definition of success?
You're in a very good space. If that has happened, that's good, because it tells you that your assumptions, you need to look back at them. You need to revisit your problem statement and your hypothesis. Don't try to force something because you fell in love with it. If you have made if you came up with an MVP and the metrics suck and the experience is not great and customers don't like it, that's a good thing, because you haven't invested a lot in actually developing a full-fledged product. Go back to the drawing board, go back to your original hypothesis, your original problem statement, look at that. And then you may need to pivot. You may need to change. You may need to do things to address that, because, if you think about it, it's not a bad place. It's better to do the mistakes early and not to invest a lot than to do it later after you had invested a lot. So I know that sometimes it's a bit painful and nobody likes to fail, but it's better to fail fast, learn, and go back and do it again than to fail and to just keep on, spending good money after bad, so to say.
Yeah, that's an amazing answer. And yeah, I've met a lot of founders who obviously, feel very invested in their product or service, and they're really passionate about it, which is a great thing. But also at the same time, it's really hard not to feel attached to it. And that's why sometimes failure makes it very hard for them. But I guess if you have that mindset of, anything is a feedback, I think that's a great way to look at it. And again, Guy, thank you so much for sharing such an insightful workshop and answering tons of questions. I've really enjoyed it as well. I learned so much from it. And I just want to end by saying that we're going to share your contacts in terms of LinkedIn, your Twitter, and your email address, which was on your screen there, maybe on the chat, in case people want to connect with you. Hopefully, you don't mind.
Free.
Yeah, and again, thank you so much. It's been really, really great. And, hopefully we get to meet each other in person, maybe after the lockdowns.
Sounds good. Anytime. Thank you.
Great. And again, for those who are watching, if you haven't done so, please register for the mailing list, because you will learn more about what's in the Future Founders program for the rest of the year. One thing I want to mention in particular is the Venture Scholarship, and it actually provides the opportunity for 8 teams to receive funding to help you focus and grow your business idea. And the successful team will also receive a complimentary membership into the StartSpace Loft and join the community of existing members developing their startup. So that's really, really exciting. Applications for that will open soon. So again, make sure you have registered for the mailing list, and you'll be the first to find out about that. And I guess that's it for now. And again, thank you so much, Guy, for your time, and everyone with all of the great questions. We really, really appreciate it. See you guys and enjoy the rest of the festival.